Seconds to live.
Here we go.
Ten seconds to live.
Count or say something.
Yeah. Sure, say 5.
We are live.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen across the globe. I'm sure you'll agree with me. As human, we are very resilient. We've survived conflicts, including wars, economic recessions, disasters, the last being COVID-19. And yet here we are. Long live to the spirit of Ubuntu, long live. Ubuntu is a Nguni deep word meaning humanity. Talking humanity, let us please join President Ramaphosa and pay tribute to the former President de Klerk, who we learned yesterday morning that he has succumbed to a long struggle on one of the deadly diseases, cancer, by observing a moment of silence. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Gubane. I am part of Team South Africa, and I will be your program director and a co-pilot together with my colleague, Mpho Liteko. Our job today is relatively easy to the rest of the team. As Team South Africa, we are very excited to present and share with the world the forest and fiber renewable and sustainable solution to green investment and economic recovery. Today, our representation would highly take a very cooperative approach in many ways, a meeting point between government and industry, pregnant with a common vision, and that is to see South Africa and the rest of South Africa thrive as part of the global ecosystem. Our representation, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, allow me to acknowledge the presence of the Deputy Minister as the leader of Team South Africa, but also a representative of our government of South Africa and the rest of the captain of the industry. Our program is very punchy, 1 hour and a half minute program, and it has 4 parts to it. First, we would take tune from the Deputy Minister address, setting the scene and the tone basically for the Team South Africa, from which we would all sing. The second part, we would welcome the representative of the forestry industry to give us an overview of the forestry sector in the country. And thirdly, my colleague Mpho would then facilitate a panel session where our panelists would discuss key issues, but also take issues as may be raised across the globe. And to this end, I would very much encourage our viewers in South Africa, in Africa, and the rest of the world to please comment and pose questions so that we can take them as much as possible. And those that we will not be able to take during the webinar, we would respond electronically. The fourth part of the program would be a takeaway and a closing remark. To that end, ladies and gentlemen, dignitaries would be introduced before they take a center stage. Ladies and gentlemen, before I officially invite my colleague Charles to do the honors of introducing the Deputy Minister, allow me to borrow an expression by our former President Nelson Mandela, open quote, it always seems impossible until it is done, close quote. This is a very loaded citation, ladies and gentlemen, and allow me to cite two things in illustrating this point. South Africa, we delivered a very peaceful first democratic election in 1994. And we have recently entrenched this foundation through our recent local government last week to demonstrate the ability of the country. And secondly, the current President Ramaphosa committed the country to facilitate 1 trillion investment in the medium term. And I am told that we are at 70% of the target and we are counting. I have no doubt that in very shortly we will be able to surpass the target as set by the President. The message here, gentlemen, across the globe is that as South Africans, as Africans, when we put our mind on something, we deliver on it. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, allow me to hand over to my colleague, Charles, to do the honors of introducing our first and the leader of Team South Africa, the Deputy Minister, my colleague, Charles.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Charles Manuel. I'm the Director Manufacturing at Invest South Africa, a division of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. And it is a great honor and privilege this morning to introduce to you the Honorable Makhotso Magdalene Sotyu. Honorable Sotyu is the Deputy Minister of Forestry and Fisheries and Environmental Affairs of the Republic of South Africa. She previously served as the Deputy Minister of Arts and Culture and the Deputy Minister of Police. Prior to her appointment, she served Parliament in various committees, including the Joint Standing Committee on Defence and Portfolio Committee on Safety and Security. Honorable Sotyu, I cede the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Charles, for that introduction. I wasn't expecting that. Good morning to the team and good morning to everyone on the platform. Thank you again to the program director, members of the diplomatic corps, distinguished guests and dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to you all from our beautiful country, South Africa. I would like to thank the government of the United Arab Emirates for hosting Expo 2020. Being a very important event, this Expo 2020 is taking place at a critical juncture when the economies of Africa and indeed the entire world are counting the cost of the COVID-19 pandemic, as you have alluded to, Program Director, and considering the measures that are urgently needed for a swift recovery. It is indeed an honor for the Republic of South Africa to be among more than 190 countries in the world linking with each other through this expo. And I salute the team led by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition in our beautiful country for ensuring that we participate in this expo. This event is happening in unprecedented times, but we have learned that as much as we have known sorrow and hardship, we have also known solidarity and cooperation. As a country, we have a number of priorities that have been committed to by government, such as stimulating economic growth and fostering a better Africa and a better world, which align with the presidential investment mobilization drive. There is no better time than now for South Africa to participate in this Expo 2020. As a country, we are embarking on a journey to reshape our economy, change lives, and create opportunities and prospects of millions of South Africans. Consequently, government economies construction and recovery plan of South Africa will be supported through economic diplomacy. As such, it is expected that we intervene in export and investment promotion, to name just a few. The central theme of Expo 2020, as you know, Program Director, is to brand and inspire the world to visit South Africa, to buy South African products, and to invest in its country and its people. We believe that this Expo will help us position the country and sector in the larger context of economic growth, thereby seizing the opportunity offered by this initiative. Our collective response should demonstrate and could be achieved when we work together. I therefore urge South Africans to work as a collective and to promote the mission of this event in South Africa. Program Director, this webinar is convened under the theme Forest Value Chain, Renewable Sustainable Solution for Green Investment and Economic Recovery. It reminds me to what is happening in Glasgow as we speak with regard to climate change and its negative impact, and the world that is struggling to mitigate climate change. In this regard, sectors such as forestry, which have potential for growth and creating economic and employment opportunities, need to be given the attention they deserve. For this reason, the Cabinet in South Africa has approved the Commercial Forestry Sector Master Plan for implementation. This master plan was approved, I think, last year, November. Mr. Michael Peter will agree with me on that one. The master plan is essentially a growth, transformation, and investment plan. We are pleased that the three major parties, namely government, industries, and labor, are committed to the master plan. This will enable the sector to grow and attract the necessary investment. It is worth noting that industries have made a commitment to invest about 24.9 billion rands in the sector, while government will facilitate and coordinate the recapitalization of state-owned plantations and new afforestations. In other words, where 68,820 hectares of state plantation will be brought back into production and 151,000 hectares established as new plantation, with communities partnering with the private sector. The new afforestation and optimization of state plantation will ensure that there is a raw material for downstreaming processing industry where investment result in higher returns and employment creation. Labor has committed to supporting these initiatives to ensure expansion of the resource in order to enable investment and transformation of the sector. Furthermore, at the core of the master plan is skills development and research, including training, reskilling, where there will be increased mechanization, and opportunities for work equity and enterprise development going forward. We have already started with the first phase of the implementation of this master plan. The 6 key focus areas of the master plan are aimed at addressing the following issues that will result in the growth of the sector, namely the expansion of the forestry resource, transformation of the sector, value addition and processing, timber theft and illegal activities, research, development, innovation, and skills development, and key inhibitors to the growth of the sector. Pardon me. We are pleased to inform you that the master plan is already in its first year of implementation, as I have indicated. In addition, positive reports have been received on investment, as well as the initial creation of employment opportunity. I believe that the team will be reporting to us as the leadership within the next month with regard to the progress report, since we are heading for the end of the financial year. Progress has been seen with the investment of 11 billion in pulp and paper, 288 million rands in sawmilling, and 420 million rands in the production of boards as from June 2021. This shows that there is movement in the areas of impact of the master plan. These investments have led to the creation of more than 600 jobs in the different subsectors. Through this master plan program director, there will be growth in terms of expansion, as well as inclusivity, more participation of small and medium enterprises. There is a need for partnership and investment in the sector in order to optimize production and continue with the diversity and the use of new technologies. The master plan is a sound platform for channeling future initiatives and investment within the sector. Before I close, Program Director, I would like to challenge your thinking with some facts, emphasizing the need for us as a collective to prioritize this sector. Forestry products contributes at least 4.5% to total manufacturing. In less than 10 years, export earnings have almost trebled, with the sector providing a positive trade balance of close to 10 billion rands. The sector contributes to almost 25% of agricultural GDP. Most forestry operations are rural-based, making it a significant contributor to the rural economies and social well-being. It is estimated that the sector supports approximately 700,000 livelihoods. Land form implemented effectively, if implemented effectively, would result in as much as 50% of Black and community ownership of land available for plantation. Currently, 3.8% of production volume is provided by small and emerging growers. With this, I'm sure the forest products value chain presents a diverse, sustainable growth opportunity, which the global audience may express interest in exploring. The department, which is my department, Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, would like to thank its partners and the role players for hosting the session successfully. I wish all participants and delegates fruitful discussions throughout the session, and it is hoped that as intended outcomes, the international community will visit South Africa to buy South African products and invest in its country and its people. As you know, we are a very warm country and very welcoming country. We have beautiful places that you can visit in our country. Just to mention a few, you know that many people, when they're visiting this country, they will never leave South Africa without visiting our World Heritage Site, just to mention the Table Mountain and Robben Island in particular. Lastly, as a country, we must continue to safeguard people's lives in livelihoods, support global economic recovery, and enhance the resilience of all our public systems. I urge everyone to realize that government cannot do it alone, and we need everyone's support. Working together, we can do more. I have learned from the inception of the master plan, the forestry master plan, that there was no way that we could do it as government without the support of the industry. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, DM. Certainly, indeed, a proudly South African representation from our leader of Team South Africa. We would, Deputy Minister, take tune from your address in enticing the globe on the possible opportunities in the sector as it may be outlined in the program. Certainly touching the key issues taking from the tune of the master plan as approved by the government. Thank you very much, DM. Ladies and gentlemen, the Deputy Minister alluded to the very pivotal role that the private industry plays in forestry and I suppose in a number of other industries. In moving on with our program, allow me to invite Mr. Michael Peter, who is the Executive Director of Forestry South Africa, an industry representative, Mr. Peter has served in his capacity as the Executive Director for Forestry South Africa for many years. He serves in a number of governance structures in the private industry, but he also serves in governance structures in government platforms. He will give us an overview and a representation of the industry, and I think very much giving a focus pitch of what one may expect looking at the opportunities and the demographics of the forestry industry in South Africa. With that, may I invite Mr. Peter to give us an overview of the industry in South Africa. Mr. Peter.
Chair, thank you very much. Good morning to the Honourable Deputy Minister, to all the delegates, to the colleagues on the panel. If you'll bear with me, I just want to bring this presentation up, and hopefully you can advise me whether that is visible. Is that visible to everybody, Chair?
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter. We can see your presentation, and hopefully our participants are across the group.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to switch my video off. Chair, thank you for this opportunity. My organization that I represent, you can see on the bottom left hand of the screen, is Forestry South Africa. We represent timber growers, commercial timber growers in South Africa. But as the Deputy Minister alluded to in her address, we have a very strong value chain that I'll speak to shortly. And so there are other associations, some of whom are represented today in the panel, who take the timber that our members, our timber growers in South Africa produce, and they beneficiate it into a variety of goods and services. So I'm speaking on behalf of the entire value chain, and I'd like to thank my colleagues for entrusting me to do so. I'm just trying to see why this isn't advancing. Apologies, Chair. I just want to see if this will advance. There we are. So as mentioned, we have a strong value chain in South Africa. It looks very much like it looks in most other plantation growing countries in the world. You can see this is the side of the business that my organization, Forestry South Africa, represents. But then we have the usual pulp, board mills, sawmills, mining timber, pole treatment plants, and so on. We're more advanced in many parts of the world, but there are other parts of the world that are more advanced than us, particularly on the tertiary manufacturing side. And so there's some really exciting things that are happening in the South African space that the panel will speak to in a moment. In terms of our plantations in South Africa, the first thing I want to note is that we occupy a very small portion of the land. Our plantations of 1.2 million hectares cover just 1% of South Africa's land surface. So it's a very small area. Unfortunately, the 1.2 million has shrunk since 1998. We used to have 1.5 million hectares of timber, but as a result of lots of factors, including some difficult regulators and sometimes vexatious and poor scientists, we've lost a lot of that area. But as the Deputy Minister pointed out, through our collaboration between government, industry, and labour, we're going to start seeing those areas recapitalised, particularly the state farm plantations and the new afforestation to which the Minister referred. Chair, I'm using the 2019 figures for obvious reasons, because everybody knows what the impact of COVID-19 has done on economies around the world. So to put the 2020 figures up wouldn't give you an accurate reflection of what our sort of average production is per year. That being said, we were fortunate through our collaboration with the South African government during the worst of COVID to see the government recognizing certain forest products as being essential to helping the country and the world fight the COVID-19 pandemic. So we were less affected by some sectors because we were able to keep manufacturing some of those goods and services. I could also use the 2021 figures, this year's figures, which were on track to be a record year. But unfortunately, as many of you would have seen around the world, we had major unrest, the failed insurrection by the supporters of the now convicted criminal and former president of South Africa, Jacob Zuma, who tried to destabilize the country. And you would have seen this televised. So again, using 2021 figures would also give you a skewed picture. Fortunately, that's behind us, and I'll speak more to that in a moment. Chair, just to say that we've got a new administration, we've got a new government, and things are starting to happen. I'll speak to that in a moment. Just to give members an idea, or delegates an idea, there's South Africa's 1.2 million hectares, and you can see how we stack up against countries like New Zealand, Australia, Chile, all of whom we used to be larger than in terms of our plantation area. But as I mentioned, since 1998, as a result of bad regulation, bad science, and lots of other stuff, we've lost a lot of area, as well as voluntary withdrawal by the industry from sensitive areas. But as I mentioned, the tide is turning under the presidency of Cyril Ramaphosa and the new administration that he's put in place. And as the Deputy Minister said, you can expect things to happen. You know, they always say things are bigger in America, but I can tell you nowhere are things faster than in China. If you look at China's 67 million hectares, I gave a similar presentation some years ago where we were comparing our rate of new afforestation to that of China. Well, at that time, the Chinese government and the Chinese country had established our entire 1.2 million hectares, which took South Africa 100 years to establish. They were establishing that area every 38 days. So if you're looking for speed, China's the place to go. Right, Chair, then just in terms of what those areas produce, roughly half of the 1.2 million hectares is pine, softwood timber. The other half is hardwood, primarily eucalyptus, and to a lesser extent, acacia mearnsii. The volumes that come off that 1.2 million hectares, in 2019, we produced 16.6 million cubic meters or 14.6 million tons. The important point to make about this slide is that that's not our maximum production. That is just what we produced in 2019. South Africa can potentially produce 18 million tons per annum, which is good news because all these investments, which I'll speak to and which the Deputy Minister alluded to, require fibre. So it's good that we have some leeway and we can increase our production, but we desperately need to increase the plantation area itself. In terms of the value of those 14 million tons that we produced, you can see just the roundwood sales. So the side of the business for which I'm responsible produced 10 billion rands worth of returns. You can see nearly R500 million less than in the previous year. But that's the primary side of the business. Then my colleagues from whom you will hear later in the value chain converted that into these products, pulp, chips, lumber, panels, mining timber, and poles, to the tune of 26.6 billion rand. So that takes us over 36 billion rand. And then when you add the value of paper production in 2019 of 10.3 billion, what you see is the total contribution of the sector in 2019 was 47 billion rand, or in US dollars terms for everybody attending today, about 3.15 billion US dollars. So that's about the size of the South African forestry and forest products industry in a fair to reasonable year, which was 2019. But we expect that to grow significantly. As the DM pointed out, the industry is currently about 1% of GDP, and we're planning that to be 1.5% of GDP over the 5-year period of the PPGI and the master plan to which the Deputy Minister referred. In terms of our attractiveness and why we're so excited, given what you may have seen on television around unrest in South Africa, well, I've made the point. We have a new administration in place, and this new administration is deadly serious about addressing the lost decade of state capture under Jacob Zuma's presidency. There are prosecutions on a daily basis taking place. People that have been involved in the state capture project are having their assets seized. There are actually Interpol red notices have been issued. Many of you may have heard of the Gupta family and their associates, who incidentally are hiding out in Dubai at the moment. They are fugitives. So maybe the leadership of the UAE can keep an eye open for the extradition order that will likely be forthcoming from South Africa in due course. So the government is very serious, as are the Chapter 9 institutions, in prosecuting those people involved in this massive state capture project. We've seen corruption and economic crimes prioritized, as the Deputy Minister pointed out, and I will speak a little bit more to that later. And we've seen the presidency restoring the credibility of our Chapter 9 institutions to protect the citizens and the economy of South Africa. More good news from a South African perspective. Our tax revenues are exceeding the targets probably for the first time in as many years as anybody can remember. Why is this really important? Well, obviously it helps us pay our national debt down. But if we're talking about national debt, there's further good news. The first thing to note is we're not the worst in the world by any stretch of the imagination. The United States and China's debt to GDP ratios are many times higher than that of South Africa. Secondly, most of our national debt is in rand terms. It's not dollar denominated debt. And thirdly, this exceeding income that we're getting from tax revenues will help us fund the much needed public investment into infrastructure. We've seen a decline over the last 25 years, and that's what's creating part of the reason for the energy crisis in South Africa has been ailing infrastructure. But the government has a massive infrastructure plan. Again, this is done jointly with the private sector, and having increased revenues through the fiscus will help support that infrastructure investment plan. There is record demand for government bonds, which all of you will understand is a very good indicator of foreign investment sentiment in the country. And we have arguably two of the best Reserve Bank governors and former finance ministers in the world. To understand why I say that, you have to have lived in South Africa to understand the kind of political pressure that was brought to bear on everybody who was in government, whether you were in a government department, a state-owned enterprise, a Chapter 9 institutions. During the state capture years, everybody was under pressure. But our Reserve Bank governor, Mr. Lesetja Kganyaga, stood firm. He would not allow Jacob Zuma and his administration to do to the South African rand what the late Robert Mugabe did to the Zim dollar, or indeed what the German government did to its own Deutschmark in the interwar years. So really hats off to him and former Minister Tito Mboweni. We have prudent and growth-stimulating fiscal and monetary policies being implemented, and you can see that in terms of the point that I made earlier on about demand for government bonds. The state, as the Deputy Minister indicated, is taking hands with the private sector and organized labor. The DM mentioned, and so did our program director, this presidentially led public-private growth initiative through which R1 trillion in new investments across 17 sectors, including our own, will be forthcoming in the industry. And I'll talk more about this. I won't dwell too much on the master plan because the Deputy Minister mentioned it, but I think really it would be useful to recognize the Honorable DM's role in helping get our forestry sector master plan over the line. And by over the line, I mean this plan has been approved by Cabinet, and it's what government and the private sector in actual fact will have to account for in terms of, as well as labor, in terms of their commitments to seeing that we're turning the country around and addressing the legacy of the 10 wasted years. The other good news for people looking to invest in forestry in South Africa is we have one of the highest rates of Forestry Stewardship Council certification for our plantations in the world. This is very important for people that are investing in South Africa's industry and want to export their products internationally, because you will know that without that FSC logo, that's very difficult to do. There is massive domestic and international fixed investments flowing into the country, which I'll speak to on the next slide. The DM has gone through the forestry sector master plan. She actually mentioned exactly these points, that the intention of this plan is to increase investment by the private sector and government, create jobs, increase South Africa's competitiveness, and I'll speak to that in a moment, and then have this underpinned by greater inclusivity in the forestry sector. And I will speak to this a little bit later, but I think it's important, anybody investing in South Africa, whether you're a domestic investor or an overseas investor, that you have to recognize the context in which we operate in this country. So there's the 7 key focus areas to which the Deputy Minister referred. I'm just going to deal with 4 of them. The first one, as the DM pointed out, is this key constraint about having more resources. It doesn't help that our members and the other value chains invest massively in additional processing and manufacturing capacity, and there's no feedstock to support it. As you heard from the Deputy Minister, there's a commitment between government that they will crowd in the private sector in the recapitalization of state forests, and that we're going to expand in terms of new forestation. Linked to this is that we have a world-leading pests and diseases research program. This KFA has a second element, which is not just about expanding the resource, but about maintaining and protecting what we already have. Many of you will know that plantation countries around the world suffer from a massive burden of pests and diseases. South Africa has a world-leading pest and diseases program. I think they collaborate with over 100 countries around the world that look to South Africa for leadership in the field of research, development, and innovation to deal with pests and diseases, biological control, genetic programs, and so on. So that's really good news if you're investing in South Africa. We're able to look after our timber crops very well. Transformation in this sense doesn't refer to the typical definition in business, which is around beneficiation. Transformation in this sense is dealing with the legacy of the apartheid era that still sits with us today in South Africa. And as I said, I'll speak to that in more detail in a moment. Then under processing, the important point here is that this is where most of the investment is going to be taking place. And this includes pulp and paper, biorefining, particle board plants, to which the DM also referred, sawmill modernization, which Roy will speak to later in the panel, engineered wood products for the built environment. That's the whole timber massification program. And it's an area in which South Africa has lagged the rest of the world. But we have a massive program that's going on there now. And furniture manufacturing, which, by the way, is getting its own master plan. And Penwell will chat about that in a while, as well as renewable energy. And as the DM indicated, this initial commitment was 19.7 billion rand over 5 years, of which the industry has already invested 11.3 billion in the last 3 years. And one of the investors has signaled the intention to invest a potential additional 14 billion rand in processing and manufacturing in South Africa. Then under the illegal timber and crime-related activities, we spoke earlier on about how Cyril Ramaphosa and his administration are clamping down on illegal and commercial crimes. The president declared commercial crimes in February of this year to be priority crimes. We suffered during the Zuma era from orchestrated extortion and violence at commercial sites. And so the president has now established a national priority committee to deal precisely with extortion and violence at commercial sites. And I'm pleased to tell you our industry is represented on this committee. You know, the construction industry and the forestry industry were suffering from mafia type activities that you saw in America and probably still do see in other parts of the world, where you cannot operate unless there's some rent seeker that is paid off in the process. So the government is deadly serious about addressing these issues, and this national committee has been established. This is important if you're looking to invest in a country, to know that law and order will be upheld, and that is certainly happening. Then in terms of research, development and innovation, to which the Deputy Minister referred, this is absolutely critical for any country's competitiveness. Again, there's been persistent decline during the Zuma era in state funding or state co-funding with the private sector, probably because anything that could be stolen from the fiscus was targeted. The good news is that the state is once again starting to co-fund forestry research, development and investment with the private sector. And this is absolutely fundamental for South Africa's competitiveness and to retaining the world-class research and protection facilities and scientists that we have. And then just on key inhibitors, we spoke earlier on under 1, 4 and 5, that each of those things have their own key inhibitors. So they're addressed in that master plan. And I would really encourage potential investors and delegates to go onto the website, have a look up for the forestry sector master plan, because there's a lot of detail and a lot of positive information in that master plan that would give anyone great comfort looking to invest in the country. But there are additional constraints that aren't sub-focus area specific, and these include the enabling economic infrastructure that I spoke about earlier on, rejigging ports, rails, energy, administered pricing, and the state's own capacity to deliver. And all of these things are now clearly captured in the master plan and are receiving attention. Then, in conclusion, Chair, I think what's important here, as I said earlier on, if you're going to invest in a country, if you're going to invest anywhere, you need to understand the context. Is your investment helping address a societal need? If it isn't, it's probably not going to be a sustainable investment. In South Africa, as I pointed out, we have a historic disparity between racial groups, which has not been adequately addressed. The racial element is declining somewhat, and I'll speak to that in a moment, but we still have the highest Gini coefficient, or one of the highest Gini coefficients in the world, between the haves and the have-nots. Wealthy Black people in South Africa now outnumber wealthy white people by a full 50%, which is evident when you look at the target demographics of advertising in South Africa. But those wealthy Black people, when you put them together with the wealthy white people, still constitute less than 25% of the population, which means 75% of the population, most of whom are Black, have not yet been brought into the mainstream economy of the country. And so for this reason, we still have a prescribed legal process known as broad-based Black economic empowerment. And our sector, I'm pleased to tell you, is one of the leading sectors in the country in this area. And so unless you recognize this injustice and this disparity and the need to address it, you may see investing in South Africa with these constraints as literally a constraint. If you look at it differently, you'll see this is a massive opportunity, and I'll speak to that in a moment. And I say this because we have also one of the highest unemployment rates in the world, clearly exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, as has happened around the world. But our massive unemployment problem can become an opportunity. And I say this because most of the people that are unemployed in this country are actually young people. And the reason why that's an opportunity, as many of you will know, in the global north, in Europe and China, you have aging populations, and those countries are actually desperate to find new people who can come in and do the work and support the pension funds and support the medical aids while other people then retire. South Africa has a massive youth cohort, and if we can get these people into employment and be part of the economy, it'll be fantastic for them, but it'll also be fantastic for the rest of the country. The Deputy Minister spoke about the land rights issue. We haven't fully addressed land reform in South Africa. People were dispossessed in this country. Again, our sector, fortunately, has been a leading light in this arena, in which we partnered with government around models. to restore land to people who are dispossessed, but in a manner that it provides ongoing benefits to those new landowners, and in a manner which supports the ongoing economic and employment opportunities that the current use of that land provide. So we've got good working models. You shouldn't be fearful of land reform. If you see all the brouhaha in the media around expropriation without compensation, honestly, I don't want to say it's a red herring. That part of it might be red herring. The land rights requirement redress is not a red herring. This is something that still has to be attended to in South Africa. But the good news is we have mechanisms to deal with this. And government and the private sector have certainly found one another in recent years around those issues. And then lastly, Chair, the last point I want to make, and the Deputy Minister referenced what's going on in Glasgow. We're delighted with some of the commitments that have come out of the COP. You will have seen in the media, and our President announced that developed countries are pledged 130 billion rand to help support South Africa move to a just transition from our coal-based economy towards more renewable-based economies. We're very excited about this because, as I mentioned earlier on, our industry is actually a long-standing producer of renewable energy. So it's a great opportunity. The only thing we would caution, and this is a message to the fuel companies that might be trolling around Africa looking for opportunities to establish trees, is that we're not interested in CDM type projects simply because South Africa is a water scarce country. We cannot afford to use water to plant trees once and create employment once and then just leave those trees as an offset for carbon emissions from the global north. Instead, we need to optimize the use of that water, as we currently do, to farm trees on a rotational and sustainable basis so that we can continue to use plantations as a carbon pump as opposed to a carbon sink, and pump CO2 into the products that my colleagues will talk about shortly, and in that way sustaining a multitude of products every day of the year which lock up CO2, create sustainable jobs, and contribute to the economy of South Africa. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter. I was very excited taking notes on some of the parts that you were alluding to. And it became a norm in the international investment space that we talk of a sustainable and responsible investment. And rightly so in the context of South Africa, that partly means embracing the demographics of land. In no doubt, the industry has shown us a way of how that can be achieved. As you alluded, that is still a long way to go. Nevertheless, we are making dents as we go. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I will hand over to my co-pilot, my colleague Mpho, to take us and facilitate the panel of experts and take us to the end of third item. Mpho.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ngubane. My name is Mpho Letoko. I'm the General Manager for Corporate Affairs and a member of the Executive Committee at SAPI Southern Africa. Just to share a little bit about our organization, SAPI is one of the leading organizations within the forestry industry in South Africa and has expanded globally to over 35 countries with operations on 3 continents. Although we remain very proudly South African because we were founded in South Africa, and this year we turn 85 years old. We're one of the leading providers of wood fiber products, and this includes dissolving pulp, biomaterials, packaging and specialty papers, as well as graphic papers. Firstly, thank you very much to my colleague, Mike Peter, for a very insightful presentation on the forestry industry. And one of the key takeaways from me is just the integration of this very large value chain within the forestry industry, which benefits almost 150,000 people in South Africa and contributes to just under 1% of South Africa's GDP. Clearly an industry that has a tangible and positive economic impact for South Africa. In addition, the forestry industry is broad and touches on many other industries that depend on the raw materials that are supplied and the products that are produced from this very industry. And these other industries that we touch on include pharmaceuticals, textile, bioproducts, furniture and construction, and many more. Today, I have the honor of facilitating a panel discussion with industry experts, and we'll be discussing some of the investment opportunities for forestry within South Africa. So joining me on today's panel, online I have with me Mr. Roy Southey, who's been the Executive Director of Sawmilling South Africa since 2009. Prior to this, he worked in the sawmilling sector in various senior management positions and as a consultant from 1987 until 2008. He is a trained forestry official and spent 10 years as a forester in all aspects of this field. Also online is Mr. Penwell Lunga. He's the current chairperson of the board of the South African Furniture Initiative and has served in this position since 2017. He has also been involved in the furniture manufacturing industry for more than 15 years, having served in the executive committees of the Furniture Manufacturing Associations in Gauteng, the Western Cape, and KZN, and he has in-depth experience and background in the furniture industry bargaining councils. Thank you. Mr. Lunga, if you could switch your camera on as well for us. And then we have Professor Bruce Sithole, forgive me, who's the professor in chemical engineering at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. He's also a chief scientist and director at Biorefinery Industry Development Facility Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in Durban. Professor Sithole previously worked at the Pulp and Paper Research Institute in Canada, Montreal, and his main focus is on the development and implementation of biorefinery technologies, specifically those aimed at the circular economy and beneficiation of waste biomass into high value products. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on this very interesting panel discussion that we're going to have today. Okay, so maybe just to kick off the discussion, we know that at an industry level, as shared by our colleague, Mr. Mike Peter, that the forestry industry has a very positive economic impact. The industry uses renewable resources. And in South Africa, we obviously promote sustainable forestry management and certification through the FSC. There is also a forestry sector master plan, and it also has a large socio-economic benefit. So perhaps I can ask each of you, just at a high level, to share with us what your thoughts are and your advice on the investors in terms of the specific areas within this very broad value chain that you would advise investors to pay attention to. And maybe I can start with you, Professor Bruce Sithole, since you are with me here in the room.
Okay.
Over to you.
Come on. Okay, Mpo. Thank you very much for that introduction. Good morning for all the attendees and listeners out there. One thing I think I need to put it into context, first of all, is that there's a question of deforestation issues. So people get concerned when talk about forestry, that you're constantly causing a lot of deforestation. Now, I'm here to tell the audience that in South Africa, there's no deforestation issues at all. So whenever you see a message say trees, don't print this article, it doesn't work, it doesn't apply here. And the main reason for that is that we don't use our natural trees for the forestry industry. We're using plantations. So we're literally farming these trees. So when you cut down the trees, you plant a new one, cut down the tree, plant a new one. So in a way, it's a sustainable way of doing it. Actually, I always tell people that the more you print, we'll grow more trees and the more jobs are created in that thing. So that's no issue. In other countries, yes, like in Canada, where I used to work there, yes, we are using natural trees. And also to a place like in Canada, it takes 50 years from the time a tree germinates to the time that it's ready for harvesting. Here in South Africa, because of our warmer climate, we harvest trees within 10 to 12 years. So we grow trees much faster. So no deforestation. So if you're coming to invest here in South Africa and so on, then that's good news for you. You won't be attacked by environmentalists saying you are causing deforestation issues and so on. Yeah. But the main issue now is that in terms of efficiency, the industry generates a lot of waste material. But now, what can you do with that waste material? And this is where the technologies called the biorefinery technologies to exploit that waste material into high value products.
Thank you very much, Professor Sithole. I think that's a very important point on deforestation, that we do not have deforestation issue in South Africa. But then touching on that refinery products, we'll go into more detail a little bit later. Perhaps I can then ask Mr. Southey, for you, which areas within this value chain would you advise some of our investors to focus on?
Good morning to everyone and to the rest of the panel. Thank you, Mpo. I think that I'm talking on behalf of the primary conversion industry, so sawmilling, solid wood, for instance. And I think the greatest potential lies in increasing our recovery from the log. Michael Peter and his associates grow fantastic timber for us, and they're trying their best to increase that. And we need to also enhance the recovery, enhance the amount of product that we extract from those valuable logs. And this is where I think investment can certainly help us. So we are hungry, and we embrace investment in technology that will allow us to extract more from the log. Now, this might be in the form of improved and efficient machinery and systems, or it may be in the development of products that allow additional recovery that is currently not happening. So I think this is where the most potential lies in our particular field, is to enhance the recovery, which means the employment of technology, the development of product, and of course, the research as into improved systems and efficiencies. You want me to say some more? I'm quite happy to do so. The extended silence. If we're talking about a new product, we're talking about enhanced solid timber products like LVL, CLT, and so there's huge potential in South Africa for investment in this direction, which would enhance the entire sawmilling and forestry sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Southey. I think we went on mute there, so just a bit of a technical glitch. Apologies for that. And then lastly, to Mr. Lunga, perhaps you can also just share from your perspective some of the areas within the value chain that you would advise our investors to really pay attention to.
Thank you very much, Mpo, and good morning to everyone listening across the world, and to my fellow South Africans, Sanbonani. Thank you for a very insightful presentation by Mike. And I am going to answer your question directly, Mpo, in a bit. But I think I'd just like to refer quite quickly in terms of the strategy that South Africans generally adopt when it comes to issues of investment and growth. And so firstly, we take a stakeholder approach. One of the things that Mike and the Deputy Minister highlighted is just that collaboratory approach between government, industry, as well as labor. I am from the South African furniture industry, Southey, which is the South African Furniture Initiative. We are quite unique in the sense that our board consists of equal representation from both industry as well as labor. Government is our key stakeholder. We also work with quite a number of other associations who are represented in the panel. One of the things that Michael, he's a good friend of mine. We also serve in the FSA executive, so I'm quite cool calling him Michael. And so one of the things that Michael highlighted is the stakeholder approach as well as the value chain approach that South Africans tend to adopt. In one of the slides, one of the things that he highlighted quite clearly is how big the Chinese forestry resources are relative to all of the other global producers. In the furniture space, China is the biggest manufacturer of furniture. They are also the biggest exporter of furniture across the world and also into this country and Africa. So to take a stakeholder approach, if you were to ask me where to from a South African point of view, we have quite strong ambitions in terms of the South African furniture industry. However, we fully acknowledge and understand that our growth is dependent on the growth of the forestry value chain. Firstly, we need to grow our forestry resources. The Forestry Master Plan and the objectives, as well as the commitments that have been outlined therein, are critical for all of the other downstream industries to grow. And so we need to grow our forestry resources, because if we do that, we become absolutely competitive, both from a local perspective in terms of our Africa growth strategy and globally. If I may just articulate in more detail what I mean, from a South African point of view, we have quite a great deal of Chinese imports, and most of, every furniture product, or most of the furniture products have wood in them, which make wood-based furniture products the biggest furniture segment. Therefore, from a local point of view, for us to be cost competitive, we need access to cheap fiber and access to very, very meaningful close-by resources from a fiber perspective, which is what the Chinese are doing. Hence, Michael highlighted how big their forestry resources are. If we become locally competitive, we also tick another box in terms of our growth into Africa. One of the things that the continent is busy with is the FACTA, which is the Africa Trade Common, which is the Africa Common Trade Area. Rules of origin are going to be critical in enabling all of the countries to grow into Africa and take advantage of the competitive positioning that the free continental free trade area will provide. Having access to key forestry resources nearby enables us to tick that box. But one of the things that is happening into the future, we also have ambitions of having every piece of furniture in every home, in every school, as well as every business in Africa, as well as the world. But one of the things that the Deputy Minister highlighted, as well as Michael, is the importance of COP26. You know, with our forestry resources, with their level of FCA accreditation, that gives us a competitive global advantage, because out of the blue and all of the sudden, we get access to some of the biggest furniture consuming countries in the world, being US, Germany, France, Japan, UK, as well as Canada. Those countries prioritize green products, and therefore investing in forestry resources, growing our forestry resources will enable us to tick all of our growth areas as the furniture industry. And maybe I would pause there. I'll come back in terms of just outlining the type of support that we provide to investors and the type of collaboration that exists in the industry to enable any new player to enter successfully and be quite competitive. Thank you for that, Mpho.
Thank you very much for that insightful opening, Mr. Lunga. And I think you have provided me a lovely introduction into my next question, really. Each of you are focusing very much on specific sectors within the forestry industry. And if we look at it, we have biorefinery technologies, timber processing, and then the furniture manufacturing sector. I'd like each of you perhaps to share with our audience joining us today any specific interventions within South Africa that we have to offer within the specific sector that you're looking at, and areas that perhaps our investors would also be interested in and would love to learn more about. And again, I will start with you, Professor Sithole. I'm not picking on you. You're just easier because you're right here next to me.
Okay. Thank you, Mpho. focusing specifically on what's called the biorefinery technologies. Just to give a quick definition of what it is. Basically, I think we are all familiar with oil and coal. We mine oil and coal, then we refine it to produce different types of products and materials. Now imagine that instead of the oil and coal, substitute that with wood. And lo and behold, you find that you get exactly the same products that you obtain from coal and oil. Hence, we're calling it the biorefinery because we are refining biomass wood. So refining coal and oil, we know that it's well, as you can see from the COP meetings and so on, it's a taboo. It's no longer desirable and all that, yeah. But if you can now use wood instead, that's a more sustainable way of producing the biomass and all that. So in this case now, especially in South Africa now, remember I said there's no deforestation issues, but the industry is inefficient in that it generates a lot of waste. Typically about 53% of the tree is lost as waste in the processing. So now imagine now what if you can take that lost material, process it through biorefining and end up producing all these high value materials. So that's the attractiveness of biorefining now, that especially focus on waste material, use it, produce high value materials. As a result, tree utilization would be well over 90% or so. So South Africa now, we are involved in doing that type of thing here. So at the CSR, with the UKZN, we have a facility now called the Biorefinery Industry Development Facility based in Durban, where we are developing, implementing, and demonstrating applications of these technologies. And I must say, SAPI is also at the forefront of these technologies. In their process for producing dissolving wood pulp, the yield is very low on that. It's 35% of that. But the materials that are being lost as waste, they are collecting them and use them to produce high value materials. For example, they're collecting that lignin, converting it into lignosulfonate, which is now used as a binder, very, very high quality material. So there are definitely opportunities here in South Africa to invest on those kind of things. The labor, of course, the labor is affordable. The material resource is there too, no deforestation issues and so on. So you can literally produce anything really that you, in terms of the chemicals using the biomass here. Thank you.
That's very interesting to hear, and thank you for sharing that, Professor Sithole. If I can maybe ask my colleague, Mr. Southey, what specific interventions in South Africa are you looking at within the timber processing area?
Yeah, I think that's it's an interesting question, and I think it's an area that holds huge potential. As I mentioned in my earlier sort of comment, we're specifically dealing with solid timber, and how can we enhance that, and what potential is there for investors here? Well, we all know that the world is moving very fast in the direction of green building. We're looking to erect greater buildings out of using timber, solid wood, and so on and so forth. We just look around the world and we see it happening in Australia and Canada, Europe, and all over. And in order to do that, it requires the more sophisticated so-called engineering or mass timber products. In South Africa, we're very small in this direction, and we need investment to help us enter this sphere. We're talking about products like CLT, cross-laminated timber, LVL, laminated veneer lumber, OSB, which is used in huge quantities around the world, but is all imported into South Africa. Not because we don't have the resource or to support that, but because we just haven't had the investment and the technology. So these areas of product development and conversion into the area that will allow us to extend the built environment or serve the built environment in greater number than we do at the moment. At the moment, the bulk of our solid timber coming out of the sawmilling industry and the primary converters is ending up in roof trusses and general structural timber. And we need to enhance that. And this is an area that holds huge potential for investors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Southey. And crossing over to Mr. Lunga, specific interventions that we're looking at in South Africa within the furniture manufacturing sector.
No, yes, thank you, Paul. As you would know, furniture is quite, when you're speaking furniture, you're talking multiple products, and which are used completely differently. When we joke, we've stolen Carl Jung's words or phrase when he says, "You are what you do." We call ourselves furniture. So I am furniture, and we are furniture. We often tell people that we are with you in your homes. We know quite a number of your secrets. We were there when you were growing your families. We were there when you were going to school, because you said honors. Believe it or not, we were there when you were at varsity. We were there when you entered work. We were there when some of the best ideas in the world, in all of the office spaces, we were there when some of the best ideas were designed. And so we are also on the verge of finalizing our own master plan, which takes a product value approach. And so we have specific strategies in terms of the various furniture segments. And so one of the things which I alluded to earlier in terms of the majority of furniture products is uncompetitive Chinese imports. And so we've put together a clear launch strategy in terms of which we are working quite hard with government. Actually, we've finalized the redefinition of our import structures and definitions to make sure that we are in a position of implementing our duty structures correctly. We're investing in design capacity to make sure that we, from a South African point of view, are in a position of designing some of the best lounges that build into who we are. We would like to brand South African products, design them in a manner that the world will consume them as South African products. We have strong bed and mattress manufacturing capabilities, which is one area where we believe we stand a strong, we have quite strong competitive capabilities to export and actually do our own FDI into African countries. From a case goods chamber, that the success of the case goods products is intricately linked to what I said earlier in terms of the value chain, because that is a wood-based product. And so what has happened, just from a South African point of view, we've been in a position to, so most of the case goods products get distributed through the furniture value chain. So the retailers, furniture retailers, distribute most of our products. They have committed, and we have a pledge that they've signed, which we did 3 weeks ago, in terms of which they have committed to absorbing quite a great deal of locally manufactured case goods products. We need government support, the South African government, in terms of the office and chair, as well as school furniture. We've put together, or the South African government have classified locally manufactured products as designated products, which means that there is a massive commitment from government to absorb quite a great deal of that product from local manufacturers. From a kitchen point of view, we design and manufacture some of the best kitchens in the world. And that is one space that is unfortunately highly linked to the growth of the South African economy. But one thing for sure, the sooner our economy takes off, that is where the kitchen manufacturers and our designers, thrive. We're working quite strong with our raw material input producers to make sure that we're getting quite a great deal of cost competitiveness into the value chain. And so if you ask me, those are the opportunities. We have a strong strategy from a lounge point of view. We have growth opportunities into Africa from a bed and mattress point of view. We have strong support from retailers in terms of our case goods products. We have strong support from government in terms of office and chair and school products. But more importantly, we have some very aspirational products in the kitchen space. And so those are all opportunities that potential investors can invest in. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Lunga. I really enjoyed your story to say that you've been with us our whole lives, in fact. It reminds me of a similar story we use here at SAPI, where we say, we are with you from the minute you wake up until the minute you go back home. So the toothpaste that you use in the morning has pulp in it. The yogurt that you eat for breakfast has pulp in it. And then when you go into your car, the dashboard material is made from wood products as well. So I'm very glad to educate our audience today that the forestry industry is not only with you every day, but has been with you since you were born, essentially. If you could just stay with me, Mr. Lunga, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the Furniture Master Plan, which highlights a significant decline over the last decade in the furniture industry due to a number of factors and perhaps also the increase in imported furniture. What opportunities do you see in this space to not only grow the furniture manufacturing space again, but also perhaps to partner and increase the export opportunities in this sector?
Thank you, Paul. There are basically 4 primary areas that industry and government, as well as labor, are focusing on in terms of our master plan. The area that you're talking to is market access, and market access, which is about growing the support for the locally manufactured furniture, driving state procurement of furniture, export promotion, which is what you've specifically referred to. And therefore, taking a value chain approach, again, it is absolutely critical for us to be in a position to comply with the rules of origin and to be in a position to retake market share in our local furniture manufacturing space. We need forestry to grow. We need forestry resources because they are a massive input into the products that we eventually manufacture and send across the world. But more importantly, we see quite a great deal of opportunity from an export, not only in Africa, but beyond. And that rests quite strongly on the capabilities of our forestry sector, the green capabilities. The green capabilities, the availability of resources will not only make us cost competitive, but however, it enables us to have a massive competitive edge in terms of being in a position of taking our products globally. We are, from an African point of view, we are participants and we are strong supporters of government in the negotiation process to give us opportunities to ensure that our furniture products do get preferential treatment. But once again, that depends quite strongly in the manner in which the rules of origin are developed. And that problem is easily fixable if we invest in proper forestry capabilities. We are working very hard and strong in terms of building skills capabilities because we want to have furniture branded products, South African branded furniture products. That requires us to invest in manufacturing technology that enables us to do that. But more importantly, in design capabilities, we want all of the young people that Michael was talking about, we want them to come to the furniture industry to express themselves and to give us uniquely South African products that can take over the local economy and the world. That is what we promise them, and we want to support them. Hence, we invest in quite a great deal in partnership with government as well as labor in building our skills capabilities in that front. And so that is where we are from broadly. Our master plan is quite a detailed document, but I've just highlighted some of the things that we're doing from a market access point of view, some of the trade intervention measures we're putting in place, as well as investing in our people capabilities to make sure that South Africans are in a position to both manufacture and design some of the most beautiful products that will serve Africa in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lunga. I'd like to maybe zone in on some of the ongoing discussions at COP26, and I'm going to ask Professor Sithole to maybe join me and discuss a little bit about this net carbon zero by 2050 and the opportunity for this industry to contribute towards that target. And then also earlier on, we heard our colleague, Mr. Mike Peter, talk about the Just Transition Partnership that's just taken place as well, with 130 billion to support South Africa in its decarbonization efforts. Perhaps from a biorefineries technology perspective, what opportunities exist for us to contribute towards these targets?
Thank you very much, Paul. Biorefinery technologies are ideally suited for this type of thing, really. It's a work. First of all, I said we are using wood biomass instead of using fossil fuels, and also too, focusing on the waste material. So by get rid of the waste material, it means there's nothing going to landfill, then greenhouse gas emissions, they're no longer a problem there too. They don't exist there too. Secondly, now in terms of the products that you'll be making, for example, in many countries, I guess it's common that they obtain their fuel through charcoal. You take wood and you paralyze wood and obtain charcoal, and they do that there. But this is not environmentally sustainable, because if you ever see the facility, you see a lot of smoke coming out and all that here. So really that's not acceptable. But however, if you can change the pyrolysis temperatures and then control the conditions, you'll obtain a material called biochar. It's similar, well, it looks the same as charcoal, but properties are very, very different, and they are fantastic properties. So the idea is now, instead of producing charcoal, produce a biochar. And then all the volatiles that are coming out as smoke and all that thing, collect those and condense them, and you obtain a material called wood vinegar. So you can end up now with two products. On one side, it's wood vinegar. On the other side is biochar. Now, this biochar now acts now as a carbon sink, because it don't degrade again, it come into other things. And what can you use biochar for? You can use it as a soil amendment to replace, say, chemical fertilizers. And this is especially ideal for small-scale farmers who cannot afford to buy fertilizers. If you use this biochar, and studies have shown that if you use this biochar, you only to replace it every 5 years or so. So it's very, very ideal for that. So imagine now you've taken that waste material and you are producing a high quality material on site. And then the wood vinegar that we have on the other side, well, it's called wood vinegar because one of the major components there is the vinegar, but there are many other components that are present in there too. That can be used as a pesticide. So therefore, you can use it to replace chemical pesticides there too, which is also a win-win situation for everyone. That too, it's part of what's called the nature-based solutions for coming this. So, and a lot of these technologies, I guess they can be used as a small scale or large scale. Everyone has to benefit and buy. So by so doing it, really, we are getting high value materials there too. So instead of, so I'm saying, instead of taking wood and that material and producing a charcoal, talk to us or come and see us, and we'll see how we can convert this into high value materials, and they can give you quite a significant products there too. So it's successful there too.
Very, very educational there. Thank you, Professor Sithole. And I suppose, you know, with these targets, we really look forward to this industry, this forestry industry, playing a massive role in helping South Africa to reduce its targets, and perhaps all the investment opportunities that exist as well in this space. Obviously, quite an interesting one. I'm going to ask Mr. Southey just a question for you before I start to wrap up. Earlier on, you referred to technology opportunities in this industry. Talk to us about perhaps also automation in the timber and sawmilling industry and the opportunities for investment here.
Yes, Paul, thank you very much. I think it's a moot point and something we haven't touched on yet. You know, obviously with modern technology, modern systems, one automatically thinks of automation and the loss of jobs. Now, that in part is true, but in the other side of that coin is that it creates higher quality jobs. So instead of needing floor sweepers and window cleaners, we need engineers, we need technicians, we need saw doctors, and people with much higher skills, much higher paid jobs, much higher status work. So that is part of what we're needing to achieve and what we're trying to achieve. And that requires investment, maybe not as greater investment in terms of dollars or rands and cents, but certainly requires investment from our outside partners and colleagues to bring those skills in. So we need people with the required knowledge who can impart that to local South Africans and South African industry. Very important aspect of development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Southey. I think there's obviously so many opportunities for investment in this industry, and we could obviously spend a lot more time going through all of them. But I'm going to wrap up now and perhaps ask each one of my panelists to just give us some of your closing remarks in addition to what you've already shared with us today in terms of sharing with the audience, possibly looking at South Africa as an investment opportunity. I'll start again with Professor Sithole.
Okay, thank you. We know that Europe, I think they're interested in looking for energy supply, getting wood chips, for example, to be used there on their side or to be processed on the other side. We do have a lot of waste biomass here too. I know at one time there was a pellet company in Durban that were pelleting these things and then shipping them to Europe for use and so on. But I guess when the carbon tax measures came in and so on, that technology sort of collapsed on that too. But anyway, there are other opportunities, as I mentioned, we can produce high value materials on the other side. And then of course, like you said, the dissolving wood pulp. Remember, in general, we were saying the pulp and paper industry is on the decline, except for the dissolving wood pulp market. That one actually is increasing. As it is, Sapis is increasing its capacity in Durban there too. So there's an opportunity there for, well, first of all, to obtain this dissolving wood pulp, but then the downstream products coming out of that material too. So opportunities are there too. So companies, for example, that are looking for binders, lignosulfonate is available there too. Binders, this can be used in the cement production. It can be used in road surfacing where there's no tar, we spray it and it controls dust and so on. Mining operations, it controls on that too. So we, South Africa, I guess we are definitely a large producer of this material, so it's available. So comment and talk to us here, and then we have in this material too. Also too, another I think item I can mention too is that we're all familiar with cellulose nanocrystals, where there's an interest now in cellulose nanocrystals. Traditional method of producing cellulose nanocrystals is very, very expensive. Here in South Africa now, we have developed a low-cost technology for producing this material. We go straight from the waste, let's say sawdust. We take that sawdust, we process it through a black box, and lo and behold, we obtain cellulose nanocrystals. So the waste material has been converted into a very, very high value material. Look at here. So we do have the technologies now for biorefining all these materials. Come and talk to us, and we can work together on that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. If I can maybe ask Mr. Southey, in one sentence, your closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Mpo. Yeah, one sentence. We have, our country has a willing workforce that is happy to welcome you, need you to support us. We have a very broad base of intellectual support. Professor Sithole is living proof of that. And so we look forward to inviting you and welcoming you to our beautiful country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Southey. And lastly, Mr. Lunga.
Thank you, Paul. In less than 30 seconds, the theme for the furniture industry this year is we remember, we rebuild, we come back stronger. Remember everything that's made us. We are in a rebuilding phase, and we're quite certain that we are going to come back stronger. So we ask everyone to come and be part of this fantastic story. Everyone needs to remember the same sun that shines over us today is the same sun that shines on Madiba. The same air we inhale today is the same one that he breathed. And come and be part of a fantastic story. We are South African and we want to take over and be part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lunga, and thank you to our panel of experts for joining us and sharing the opportunities for investment in South Africa. Obviously, we are inviting anyone that's interested in investing within this forestry industry to please come and engage with South Africa. We are open for investment, and we're looking to you to partner up and grow this industry and take it to higher heights. Thank you very much. At this stage, in the interest of time, I'm going to hand back to our moderator, Mr. Ngubane. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my co-pilot, Mpo. A sterling job and insightful discussion with our panelists. An excellent job. Deputy Minister, guests across the globe, I'm taking 4 key messages out of the panelists, and I think it talks to the heart of the scene as said by the minister. One is the value of the forest sector in our lives, but also in nature, and I think it's come very clear in various humbling stories by the panelists. 2 is that while there is domestic opportunities in the context of South Africa provides an opportune moment as a gateway to the rest of Africa, both from an investment, but also from a marketing perspective. And I think that message came very strongly from our panelists. 3, there is a resource base from which the investment are anchored. And I think the colleagues talks of or made reference to the available raw material in the country. They made reference to the human capacity labor. They made a reference to various utilities as the base on which the investment can be anchored. Maybe fourthly or lastly, to the world, the message was we are ready for investment and to partner with you. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, I think it is fitting, and if you allow me to invite my colleague, Mr. Estus Mashimbe, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Proudly South Africa, a position that he has held since 2016. If I may just give an introduction to his resume. He is a qualified accountant majoring in financial accounting and commercial law. He is also studying toward his MBA degree. As if that is not enough on what he is looking at academically, he is completing his studies toward corporate governance. The son of the soul and a very spirited scholar. He is, or he has served in various senior positions, both from the private as well as public sector for at least the past 10 years at senior level. He is also a member of a board of director for the South African Savings Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, it is fitting to invite him to give us the closing remarks and the take home. And I think who is best positioned to do that other than the man responsible or tasked to promote brand South Africa. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Program Director. What an introduction. I would never have introduced myself like that. So I'm humbled, truly humbled. Thank you very much. My task this morning is to deliver the closing remarks, and on behalf of the forestry sector in South Africa, and you've heard from various players who are part of this industry, I would like to express my appreciation to all of you who managed to join us from various countries in the world for your cooperation, which has enabled us to host a highly productive webinar. All the speakers this morning have highlighted various investment opportunities that can be pursued by investors and donors within this forestry sector value chain. And in conclusion, and as mentioned by the various speakers this morning, South Africa's forestry sector value chain remains a viable one with high returns on investment, mostly for the following reasons. And I want to touch on just a few of those as I conclude. The first one is the fact that we have an integrated value chain. South Africa's forestry industry supplies into diverse value chains, producing pulp, paper, boards, packaging or construction, building material, and furniture. And the furniture manufacturing sales is sitting currently at 16.2 billion rands, and we on an annual basis, and we have already noticed growing exports to the region that we're based in, as well as to the rest of Africa, which represents even higher returns for anyone wanting to invest in this industry. Secondly, we have a robust market growth because if you think about wood-related manufacturing, the output thereof has increased by more than 25% to almost 134 billion rands, with the paper and paper product segment recording the highest growth of 35% between 2014 and 2018. Thirdly, we have robust investment demand. In 2017, the forestry industry attracted more than 46 billion rands in total investments, and close to 20 billion rands of this was invested in machinery and equipment. Pulp and board productions attracted the largest share of these investments, accounting for about 19 billion rands. And the fourth element that I want to touch on is the fact that we are a sustainable and certified source of wood. About 80% of South African plantations are certified under the Forest Stewardship Council, with that which is known as the FSC. So under that system, we have about 80% of our plantations certified, and in total, about 1.4 million hectares of South African forest area are FSC certified, accounting for about 20% of all certified forest areas on the African continent. We're a large supplier of pulp. South Africa produces about 12.5 million cubic meters of pulp wood, worth close to 7 billion rands per year, and the country's potential to produce up to 18 million. Therefore, the pulp and paper mills produce close to 18 billion rands in output per year, supplying both domestic and foreign markets. As South Africa, we are the 12th largest pulp exporter in the world, exporting close to 12.5 billion rands of dissolved wood pulp, and investment potential in this industry is in the further beneficiation of the pulp. Lastly, we have a large youth cohort, and this was touched on by one of the speakers this morning, to say we have a large youth cohort compared to most of the global north. The high unemployment rate within this segment of our population presents itself as a massive opportunity, and I won't unpack that because it was touched on this morning. So I think that is another reason why you should consider this industry within South Africa as an opportunity for you to invest. And so in conclusion, I want to thank you once again, all our partners, our sponsors, our colleagues, our associations, and different speakers who spoke this morning, starting with the Deputy Minister, Makhotso Sotyu. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Mr. Michael Peter, the Executive Director of Forestry South Africa. Ms. Mpole for ably facilitating that very interesting panel discussion. The different panelists, Professor Bruce Sithole, Mr. Roy Southey, Mr. Penwell Lunga, a good friend of the Pro South African campaign, and everyone else who managed to join in and contribute to this webinar. My deepest gratitude goes to all who have attended and who have done a wonderful job in making this webinar a success. Thank you very much. And we're looking forward to seeing you consider this country as a possible investment destination. As you can see the logo behind me.
Thank you.
Yeah. Somebody's talking, but as I conclude, Program Director, I wanted to say the logo behind me represents everything that is made in South Africa, the tick in the logo tells you that what we produce as a country is of a high quality nature. And we are definitely one destination that you can consider. This industry, as unpacked by my colleagues, as I tried to summarize at the end, gives you a sense as to why you should consider us. Thank you very much. Wishing you all a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Justice. Deputy Minister, esteemed guests, colleagues, thank you very much for joining us. We are at the tail end of our program. May I encourage the international community to visit the live Expo online. This webinar happens within the framework of Dubai Expo, and we have a dedicated displays rooms that you can visit to see various of products that you may be interested on, and make networks as it may be appropriate. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the program with I think the closing of my colleague. There is no further other than closing for me, other than to thank our Team South Africa leader, Deputy Minister. Thank you very much for bracing us with your presence and setting the tone. And hopefully, as your team, we haven't disappointed with the contribution of the colleagues. Thank you very much.